Here is a great tip. There are only two things that you really need to learn when you study a foreign language. It's words and how to put them together. You just can't learn a language without learning words, and a lot of them. Memorizing vocabulary list and grammar rules which determine how you use these words can be the real pain of the language study. Now in this lecture we are going to learn how the vocabulary can be easy and painless as much as possible. There aren't really an answer on how many words do you have to learn when you study a language. It will really depend on what you want to say and to understand. A couple of hundred words might do if you want to get around the country and to meet your very basic needs, but to carry on a simple conversation on general topics you'll need about 2,000 words. To hold a fairly serious conversation with people and to read the newspapers you'll need a minimum of 5,000 words. But don't worry about the numbers now. At any stage, the most important thing is to use all the words you know. The traditional ways to study vocabulary is to use a word list. On the left there is a word that you don't know, and on the right the list of that same translation words on the language that you do know. You sometimes remember what a word on a list means, not because you actually remember the word, but because you remember which word came after which on the list, so you remember order. Or you remember which word it was that came near the top of the list. So put the words in a different place on the list and suddenly you don't remember what it means anymore. Now here's the point. Instead of the list, I recommend you use word cards to learn vocabulary. Word cards are variation on the idea of the word list, but they don't have the drawbacks of the list. In fact, they have many extra advantages. You can mix the order of the cards around, which means you won't remember the meaning of the card just from its place on the list. And as you go through the vocabulary cards of a new lesson, you will learn some words very quickly. And when you are certain that you have learned them, you can just wipe them out and keep in the pile only the words that you haven't mastered yet. This permits you to concentrate your effort on the smaller numbers of harder words. You can keep together those words from all the lessons that you are particularly have a headache with, the ones you just can't seem to remember, and this will be a pile to pick up often. And the best thing is that you can grab this pile of cards that you don't know and take them somewhere if you think you may have to wait a while for some times, so you have a spare time to practice them. The best way to memorize a vocabulary is to have some association with that word, association or similarity. You may notice a similarity with some word that you have already learned in your new language. Or the word may remind you of something possibly unrelated which helps let the word stick in your mind. However you do it, get a handle of that word. And as you go through your word cards, always say each word out loud or at least whisper to yourself. You have to hear the sound of that word. Remember, you're training several parts of your head at once. Your mind by thinking about the whole process, your eye by seeing and recognizing the word, your mouth by saying the words as you study it, and your ear by hearing what you're saying to yourself. Saying the words and hearing it are as important as seeing it, and use your best hummed-up foreign pronunciation. You may feel self-conscious at first about talking to yourself, but you'll soon get over that. The faster you stop being shy, the faster you will hammer that language quickly. And go over the word list or the pile of the word cards until you can run them through very fast. It isn't really good enough if you have to puzzle over each word before you remember the meaning, but remember that you're trying to reach the stage where you don't have to think. You want to get to the point where you can almost go automatically from the foreign words to an English. This is not an intellectual exercise, you're just learning to build an automatically language reflexes through repetition. And the easiest part of the learning process is always start with the foreign language side of the word card face up first. All you have to do is to remember what the foreign word means, and here is where your memory tricks are most important. They help you to recognize the foreign word and learn its meaning. You don't really need the memory tricks anymore after you start recognizing the word. You want to get where you don't have to think about it anymore. And then just turn the process backwards. First, go with the English word and then go with the foreign word. Because it is harder, now you have to remember precisely what the foreign word is, but at least you're already seen it and said it several times when you were looking at it earlier and trying to remember in the English. So always do the card both ways, first the foreign word and then the English and then the opposite. Just going one way is not good enough. For some reason the mind sees these as a different processes. Doing it one way is no guarantee that you can do it in other. Going from English to a foreign language is an active process, where you're training your mind to think in a foreign language. And don't use these cards exclusively for single words. You should also make up cards with phrases or expressions that you especially want to learn. And by all means, put additional information on the cards about the words you need to remember, such as special forms or irregularities or anything else. As you learn the words, it really helps to try to make up sentences out of the new words. This makes the new words more real, and at the same time you'll be able to use other words that you already learned. So you will be reinforcing sentences structures as well. And here is the last tip: go back and review the words you learned earlier. You may find you have forgotten some of them because you haven't used them very often. You may also find that you can flip through those old cards a lot faster than you ever were able to do that before. That is a sure sign that you're making a progress, even when you thought you weren't. And of course, remember that making these cards and studying them is all part of the process of repetition, an essential part of the language process. You're trying to implant a whole new language into your mind. So as with a house, it wasn't built in a day, so you have to put one brick at a time until you get the whole of it. And don't be passive again, make up a little sentences to yourself using the new words and do the maximum with the new vocabulary, not the minimum.